I hear pure silence, so I'll go ahead and jump in. This is our overview of our service learning training for Pikes Peak Community College, and specifically provides the foundation for beginning your projects and answering how we define service learning, community engagement, and community-based learning at Pikes Peak Community College. So our game plan for today is to take a look at defining service learning, what is it, taking a look at PPCC service learning data from the previous academic year, talking about challenges and resistance, discussing how we celebrate service here, and then looking at what do I do to get started. After that, we'll have some time for specific questions, and of course at any time, you can always reach any of the faculty service learning coordinators with anything that comes up during service learning and getting ready for service learning, anything that you're thinking about. We're really here to help, and we've got a great support area. So let's start out with, what is service learning? When we define service learning, we actually take apart the entire term. So if we go back 2 slides, when we look at service learning, we have the word service, we have the hyphen in the middle, and learning. And what I've discovered through my research is every part of that word matters when we start to blend community and our classrooms and the learning process. So if we begin with the word service in service learning, we get to take a look at one of my absolute favorite philosophers, John Dewey, who said that we do not learn from our experiences, but we learn from reflecting on our experiences. So the part of service is going out into the community to have a concrete experience that we can then bring back to the classroom and reflect upon. So that means the learning part of this term involves whole cycle of learning, which starts out with that concrete experience, takes a look at reflective observation, applies abstract conceptualization, so what theories, concepts, and terms do I have to my classroom that I can apply to that experience, active experimentation, so what am I going to try differently, what am I going to apply next time, and the cycle continues to go. So we have the service part where we're actually volunteering, engaging in the community. We have this learning part that occurs, and then we have this hyphen in between. And this is what bridges together service and learning, and specifically looks at outcomes that we have. So this is the service learning prism that comes from Prentice, Robinson, and Patton's work, who decided to look at data that we had over the course of 5-6 years, and what are some of the outcomes we've seen with community college students and their service learning experiences. They decided that it is very prism-like because it's almost, they actually described this to me, it's the Pink Floyd album cover, yes, where you have the light go through it, and then you have all these scattered reflections of these outcomes and impacts that we see with service learning. And what we've done is our service learning survey and rubrics actually reflect upon these, and we're seeing that our students do this as well.
There's a request for you to move a little closer to the camera.
Camera?
It's right there.
Oh, okay.
And we're having trouble with slides. Our says they're working, but they're not. Apparently.
Yay for technology. Okay, so just to confirm, we can see the slides, we can see me, we can hear me.
Robin says yes.
Okay. All right, so keep going. If anything else doesn't work out technically, just let us know.
She said yes, but the slides aren't shared, so
Can we email those to all the folks?
Sure.
At least they can follow along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now they're saying they're not showing
Okay, we're learning
Mm-hmm.
at a very slow pace, but we are learning. Zach is currently working on a couple of things. He's going to try to email the slides to you, and then we're going to click on a few things to see if we can't get them to show. Thank you for your patience.
Good.
We're good?
Yep, slides are now showing.
Slides are now showing. Okay. All right, so I'll backtrack just a little bit talking about, we've got service, we've got the learning part. Here we're looking at the hyphen part of what are the outcomes of service learning. And this PRISM, this model, is available in the library guide. We've got it in this PDW training that we always post in our library guide. So if you want to look at it further, it's just fascinating to see this model that we have that began last decade and then the connections that we have from the work that we're doing today. So we have service, we have hyphen, we have learning, and that gets us the entire concept of service learning. And specifically, service learning has been housed through George Q under our high impact practices. So here at Pikes Peak Community College, we have high impact practices all together, which you can see involve first year seminars, common intellectual experiences, learning communities, writing intensive courses. These are touch points in the learning process that have shown to have positive outcomes on students experiencing deeper, meaningful learning throughout their programs, and also increasing sense of belonging and helping with retention rates as well. So these practices have been recognized nationwide, and specifically here, we house them under our High Impact Practices department. A huge part, let's go to the next slide, the work that we do specifically in service learning is with our community partners. And community engagement is key to this entire process. So that's why specifically we help as much as possible through HIPS to build strong relationships with our community and to make sure that everyone has what they need from the relationship that we have. So to add to that, we have our definition of community engagement. This comes from the Swearer Center at Brown University, who does extensive studies on community engagement between campuses, their local communities, and their campus communities, and looks at them nationwide. So this is how we observe community engagement, and this is a working definition. So it describes the collaboration between institutions of higher education and their larger communities, that's local, regional, state, national, and global, for mutually beneficial exchange of knowledge and resources in a context of partnership and reciprocity. To keep that simple, it's how we make sure that we are regularly meeting with our community partners, that we're building and maintaining strong relationships, that we're ensuring our students are having good experiences, and that we're not walking into the community saying, here we are to solve all the issues. We're here to work together and to build a strong relationship. On the next slide, we can see the extended community engagement piece. And this one is a little longer. It's certainly not going to read it, but what I like to point out here is all of the outcomes that we see between community engagement and our work in the classroom and through co-curricular programming. So we enrich scholarship, we enhance our curriculum, we help prepare educated, engaged citizens, strengthen democratic values, civic responsibility, and specifically address critical societal issues and contribute to the public good. But from the next slide, we see that specifically that depends on reciprocity. It means that we have an active, ongoing relationship with everyone that we're working with.
Keeps hopping, yeah.
Zach is going wild with my PowerPoint. Wild. But I highlighted key aspects here is we're trying to create relationships that have mutual respect, shared authority, and co-creation. And thanks to Joellen and Robin, we have these established and we're continuing to create more, which is really cool about our campus. So if we go to the next slide, we can actually see several of the relationships that we already have. This means as you're planning your service learning project, you're not starting from scratch. We have relationships that already have defined needs, that have a defined contact point, and we help to create those connections for you. So through this first part, I've gone through a lot of information that lives on the library guide, but I always like to start with how do we define service learning, how do we define community engagement, and how do we actively apply that in our work. So before I transition to the data that we have, are there any questions?
So the contact information for those community partners, where can I find that?
That's a great question, Joellen. If you go to ppcc.edu, you can get to this a couple of different ways. It's on our High Impact Practices website, and then it's also in the library guide for High Impact Practices. We have our own service learning tab, and we also reach out via email.
I think it's called Ways to Serve, is that right?
I don't know. Yes, it is.
Fabulous.
But it's honestly been helpful. If I ever, and I'll talk about this later, if I have something that doesn't work out with the partnership, or I hear from the community partner at the beginning of the semester and then they're gone and I don't hear again, I've already introduced the project, I can go to this website and connect with someone else. So you never have to start entirely from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and press on to the data that we've seen here at PPCC, and specifically what the outcomes of service learning have been. We collect data from students in two specific ways. We have a service learning rubric that we embed in all of our service learning courses. That means you don't have to go and find it, you don't have to add it to your course shell, you don't have to panic, we have it in there for you. We also have a survey for students to respond to, and it collects both quantitative and qualitative data, so numbers and words, and gives good feedback on how our relationship is going. We've also added a survey looking at community partners and their feedback on the work that we're doing. So here you've had an overview of some of the data that we have, but specifically, it's neat that we have nearly 70% of our students reported meeting someone with a different background. I use our discussions in class and the essays that we read to fully understand how society views senior citizens. It made me more aware of how they should be treated and what measures I can take in my own community to ensure they're taken care of. The next one, we had a report out of 73% of students stating that they enjoyed tying their course knowledge to real-world experiences. I don't just read something in a textbook and discuss it in the classroom, but I go out and have this volunteer experience or this community engagement experience, and then I bring that back and get to chat about it and connect different theories to it. So it's really cool to see this process come to life. One individual mentions that there is much more to philosophy than I once thought. So you don't just see the community engagement impacting the person internally, but it impacts their connection to that discipline. On the next slide, we have a fascinating piece that came out on retention rates. And we're seeing one of the key findings was that part-time students in service learning classes were more likely to persist. So if I'm not able to attend full-time, if I'm not able to be on campus as much as possible, this increases the way that I engage with my coursework, engage with my discipline, and am more likely to continue on. So positive impact on retention. And then this exciting part, which is a breakdown of some of the outcomes of service learning, and hopefully you can see this on the slideshow, but it increased sense of belonging, increase in values and beliefs, increase in connecting to the community, increase in attitude about serving others, and there was a high likelihood to continue volunteering. So that prism we saw earlier, we see these outcomes here in the data we're collecting, which means that our data is vital. So in the rubric, we measure civic engagement, we measure transformational learning, career readiness, teamwork, and the key of all of this data that we're continuing to collect is to make sure we get more of it and make sure we're getting data from every single student in every single class. So we'll talk a little bit more about embedding that in the D2L and what that looks like later on in the questions and in the how do I begin. But we try to make this process smooth, and then we also make sure we get the data back to you so you know exactly what the impact was of your service learning project. I don't ever want to pretend that service learning is perfect. I have had situations where I am so excited, I introduce the project, I talk to students about it, and we're all on board. We're saying, okay, we're gonna do this. And then I hear from the community partner that we're not able to do this. Something didn't work out, we don't have the space, we don't have the funding, it's not going to happen. And there's that taking a breath and figuring out what to do next. The cool thing about service learning, and this is something that Ruth Ann pointed out, is it's just like teaching. Not everything works out perfectly. You have assignments that might not be as helpful as you thought it would be, or it's missing this component. So it's all about taking that deep breath and remembering that service learning is flexible and that you can apply it in so many different ways. And just really thinking through, this is real world, and I'm taking this real world application into the classroom and letting students react and be in that moment of, here's what this looks like, let's come up with something else, or let's develop something else. So there can be those types of challenges. Again, this is why HIPS is here to support you and the service learning coordinators. There's also forms of resistance to service learning, and the research claims that they are service loitering, passive resistors, victim blaming, and active resistance. And I've seen this in a couple of different ways in the classroom. And what I always learn is that it's not just all about that service learning project, but a lot of times it's, I'm doing so much. I have a lot going on. I'm a parent. I'm working full time. I've got a lot of obligations elsewhere. This just feels like something else I've got to do. And so we'll talk about how creating options and ensuring that service learning is flexible has been far more effective for students in different situations. I put this up here because I don't want you to think ever that service learning is perfect. It is a journey, but it is meaningful and it's very much worth the work. I also want to emphasize that here at PPCC, we celebrate service, and we celebrate service not just for faculty, but we invite students and we invite our community partners. At the Celebrate Service event every April, we have the Youth of the Year from the Boys and Girls Club come in and share their speech. We have all sorts of different community partners who have come in to share the work that we've done. We have our students there to talk about their experiences, and we also nominate a student and faculty member for their outstanding work and service. For Celebrate Service, something to keep in mind is we will come to you and say, hey, what do you have, what artifacts do you have, what examples do you have of service throughout the year? So throughout your entire journey and your service learning courses, we say capture that and let students know, like, we're gonna celebrate this together. This is hard work, it's not easy, but we have this moment of triumph and appreciating what we've done. Everyone deserves a cookie for their hard work. So the last piece we want to talk about is how in the world do I get started? We've got this great information on what service learning is, we've got the data, we've got the challenges and potential resistance, and we also want to celebrate. So today, what do you do to get involved in service learning? We have done our utmost to ensure that this works in a way that is meaningful for faculty, where you're not filling out multiple forms and jumping through hoops, trying to incorporate this into your classroom. Our goal is to make sure that you're recognized for your work in service learning, to make sure you have the support that you need, and to provide the data to help know what's working and what might not be working. So our simple steps is you fill out the intent form for service learning. It is a 2-page, 4-question with 2 questions where you just mark yes or no guide that we're happy to help walk through filling out. And it's just a way to acknowledge, hey, yes, I really would like to do this. I'd like to step into this, and I'd like to begin my service learning journey. Throughout the entire process, from beginning the intent form to discussing your project, we have 4 faculty service learning coordinators. That's myself, Katie Wheeler, Ruth Ann Larish, we have Teresa Agan, and we have Gina Swanson. And we're purposely embedded throughout the PPCC system, different campuses, different divisions, because we want to be here to help you. And truly, we help with the entire process. So if you need to connect with a community partner, need to discuss reflection projects, we've got several examples, need help filling out the intent form, or even in the middle of the semester it's stressful and just need a cup of coffee and to talk about service learning, we're here for you. So the other thing to consider too is I want to get started, I want to fill out that intent form, but what do I want to do? What is my project actually going to look like? I have used the word flexible several times throughout this process, and I truly mean from the depths of my heart that service learning is flexible. It can be woven into a variety of disciplines in a very meaningful way. So you do want to think through, do I want to do individual placements? Do I let my students decide where they want to volunteer and how they volunteer, and then they bring those experiences back to the classroom and reflect on them? Do I have an entire class project? Do we all select one thing we're going to do, and we either work on separate parts of it, or we go and volunteer one day at the same time to share that experience together? There's also on-campus service. There's a lot of work that we need done around our campus and several touch points of community engagement. And now at the Centennial campus, we have the community table. So you have the resources you need here if you want to run a project on campus. There's also group projects. I've had my class split into 4 or 5 groups, and they each design their own project. You could make service learning optional. I do this for my online classes several times, as this is an optional piece, and then you complete the reflection for extra credit. And then there's also one-day events. So you say, here's an event that we're going to attend. We're going to write down our experiences and then bring them back to the classroom. With all of these options, think about what works best for your student learning outcomes, what works best to meaningfully embed service learning into your classroom. You're not doing a volunteer project every single week. You're not constantly talking about service learning. It should be something that is a part of your pedagogy. And this is how I talk to my students about it. I am not adding it on top of the course, but when we learn about symbolic interactionism, the elaboration likelihood model, when we talk about gender and communication, it's in the context of, well, what were your experiences here in this volunteer work that you did, and how does that tie back to this theory that we're talking about? So it can be those little touch points that lead up to that reflection piece or to another discussion. And then always remember that you have full support here. You are not alone in service learning. We are passionate about it. We love it. So anything that we can do to help, that's what we like to be here for. So at this point, my promise was to tell you what service learning is, talk about the data, discuss challenges and resistance, discuss our upcoming celebration and our annual Celebrate service, how to get started, and now I want to leave time for any questions that we might have. But not all at once. I don't like when everyone unmutes at the same time and has 10 questions.
Robin asks, does extra credit project count as a service learning course?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I'm curious to see what the directors of high impact practices think, because for me, I think that it does, because sometimes that's the reality of the course. But what do others think? What do you say, Rutha?
I think it would be.
I think it would be too. That's a good question, yeah.
Are you asking as a service learning already put together class, or one that is not official?
Either.
Either?
To be official, I mean, they can do service learning, but not be an accredited. Everybody can do service learning without it being official
Mhm.
capstone or class under that umbrella.
The only problem
Yeah.
that I see
Yeah.
with it is if you don't talk to high-impact practices about it, we don't know that that's occurred. So we don't know the impacts, we don't know the outcome, and we don't honestly know how to follow up if you need additional help or whatnot. So I would say yes, it's service learning, but definitely report it to get it recognized as service learning.
Yeah.
Mhm. So is that,
Robin has
oh.
a follow-up question.
okay?
The extra credit, or a comment rather, the extra credit part limits who is impacted. And
Not everybody
she
would do it.
also
Mhm.
comments, we'd like all students to experience this.
Mhm. I absolutely agree. What I found with my online classes is it hasn't always been realistic, but adding letters of advocacy has helped for everyone in that online setting to have that experience. So for me personally, I prefer to have everyone have access to it. But no matter what, shout out what you're doing, talk about it, let us know.
Robin agrees.
Thank you, Robin. If there's other questions, we have our contact information on the library guide. We've got it on the website. We're also happy to meet one-on-one. I have found that that's really helpful to get to sit down, talk about your project, talk about what you want to do, and what it would look like. Well, with that, I'm ready to wrap up.
And the recording of this, if you want to pass it on to your colleagues or view it again, will be available. Just reach out to hips@ppcc.edu and we'll make sure you get it. We'll also try to post this on the live guide.